Have you ever wondered what happens when a car company known for muscle and speed decides to chase luxury instead? What if I told you that Pontiac, a brand famous for raw power and aggressive styling, once tried to build a car that could rival Cadillac and Lincoln? A car designed not just for speed but for comfort, prestige, and elegance? But here's the big question. Did Pontiac succeed? Or was it just a misguided dream? That's exactly what we're about to explore today. And if you stick around until the end, you'll discover a hidden truth about Pontiac's luxury gamble, something most car enthusiasts don't talk about. Let's go back in time and uncover the story behind Pontiac's most luxurious car ever made. The Pontiac identity, a muscle car legend trying something new. For decades, Pontiac had a clear identity. It was the brand for drivers who wanted power, performance, and a little bit of rebellion on the road. It wasn't as expensive as Cadillac, and it wasn't as conservative as Buick. Instead, it sat in the sweet spot. Affordable, stylish, and always packed with attitude. From the legendary GTO to the sleek Firebird, Pontiac built cars that made hearts race. Its customers weren't looking for the smoothest ride or the quietest cabin. They wanted speed, control, and the thrill of the open road. But in the 1970s and 1980s, the American car market was changing. Muscle cars were fading, and luxury was rising. Cadillac, Lincoln, and even European brands like Mercedes-Benz and BMW were dominating the high-end market. Buyers wanted soft leather, digital dashboards, and smooth, effortless rides. And Pontiac? It saw an opportunity. The birth of a bold experiment, Pontiac's luxury gamble. Pontiac decided to step into the world of premium cars, a world it had never truly belonged to. The idea was simple. What if Pontiac could build a car that combined luxury with just a hint of performance? A vehicle that could compete with Cadillac and Lincoln, but still retain a Pontiac soul. On paper, it sounded brilliant. Pontiac had a loyal customer base, and some of them were getting older, looking for more comfort without sacrificing style. Instead of losing those buyers to Cadillac or Buick, Pontiac wanted to give them an option, a true Pontiac luxury car. But there was one major problem. Pontiac wasn't known for luxury. It had to convince buyers that it could compete in a world dominated by brands with decades of prestige. And in the car industry, reputation means everything. The challenge: can a performance brand sell luxury? Think about this. When you hear the name Pontiac, what comes to mind? Is it plush leather seats and a whisper-quiet ride? Or is it the roar of a V8 engine and the thrill of acceleration? That was Pontiac's biggest hurdle. It wasn't just about building a luxurious car. It was about changing public perception, and that's never easy. People trusted Cadillac for luxury. They knew Lincoln for comfort. Even Chrysler's Imperial had a history of high-end design. But Pontiac? It had to earn its place in this market. And here's the thing about luxury buyers. They're not just looking at horsepower or flashy styling. They care about prestige, status, and long-term reliability. They want a car that feels exclusive, something that makes a statement before the engine even starts. So, did Pontiac manage to pull it off? Did its most luxurious car stand the test of time? Or did it become just another forgotten experiment? That's exactly what we'll uncover as we dive deeper into the design, features, and legacy of this ambitious machine. And trust me, the answer might surprise you. Stick with me, because we're just getting started. In the next section, we'll reveal the exact car that Pontiac could be, the one that was supposed to redefine what a Pontiac could be. And by the end, you'll know whether Pontiac's luxury dream was a success or just an expensive mistake. You said proceed to the next section consists of 800 to 900 words, with all above instructions. Create a proper explanatory flow attached with the previous section to look professionally. Don't talk to mention extra things like, in the next section we discuss what things. You have to give me a ready-made script section, so I just copy and paste to create a voiceover from this section, ChatGPT said. Pontiac's legacy in the auto industry. For decades, Pontiac was a name that stirred excitement in the hearts of American drivers. It wasn't just a car brand. It was a statement. From the moment Pontiac was introduced as a division under General Motors in 1926, it had one goal: to offer powerful and stylish cars that the average American could afford. By the 1950s and 60s, Pontiac had perfected that formula. The Bonneville, GTO, and Firebird became symbols of American performance. These weren't just cars, they were machines built for the thrill of the road. The GTO in particular is credited with launching the muscle car era, cementing Pontiac's place in automotive history. But Pontiac's appeal wasn't just about speed, it was about personality. The cars had an aggressive stance, bold styling, and a rebellious spirit that separated them from more conservative brands like Chevrolet or Buick. A Pontiac wasn't just driven, it was experienced. As the 1970s arrived, things started to change. America was facing oil crises, rising insurance costs, and stricter emission regulations. Muscle cars were no longer the kings of the road. Buyers were shifting toward luxury, comfort, and fuel efficiency. Brands like Cadillac, Lincoln, and even Mercedes-Benz were growing in popularity. People wanted softer rides, quieter cabins, and high-tech features. Pontiac had a decision to make. It could either double down on performance and risk losing market share, or it could evolve. And evolution meant stepping into a territory Pontiac had never truly mastered: luxury. The problem? Pontiac had built its legacy on power, speed, and affordability. Luxury required something different. It wasn't just about bigger engines or flashy styling. It was about refinement, prestige, and exclusivity. Cadillac had been perfecting luxury for decades. Lincoln had built a reputation for smooth, effortless rides. Even Buick had positioned itself as an upscale alternative to Chevrolet. But Pontiac? It was caught in the middle. Could a brand known for aggressive muscle cars suddenly convince buyers that it belonged in the luxury market? Despite the risks, Pontiac was determined. The company believed that luxury didn't have to mean sacrificing performance. It set out to create a car that would offer the best of both worlds. The smooth elegance of a Cadillac, but with a Pontiac edge. This was more than just an attempt at a new model. It was a gamble on Pontiac's future. If Pontiac could pull it off, it could expand its audience, keep its loyal customers as they aged, and compete in a new market. But if it failed, it could damage the brand's identity, alienate its core buyers, and lose credibility. The challenge was immense. Pontiac needed to create a car that was elegant without being aggressive, and luxurious without losing its identity. Every decision, from the suspension tuning to the dashboard materials, had to strike the perfect balance. But here's the question: did Pontiac succeed, or did it overestimate what its buyers really wanted? To understand that, we need to look at the car Pontiac built, the one that was meant to redefine what the brand could be. The car that was supposed to prove that Pontiac could do luxury just as well as Cadillac or Lincoln. And this is where the real story begins. By the late 1970s, Pontiac had built a strong reputation for performance, but the market was shifting. American buyers were changing, the muscle car era was fading, and luxury was becoming the new status symbol. Owning a car wasn't just about speed anymore, it was about comfort, prestige, and a smooth ride that made long drives feel effortless. Pontiac saw what was happening. It watched Cadillac and Lincoln dominate the luxury market, offering large, elegant cars with plush interiors and cutting-edge technology. Even European brands like Mercedes-Benz and BMW were gaining traction among wealthy buyers who wanted a blend of refinement and performance. For Pontiac, this presented both a challenge and an opportunity. It had loyal customers, people who had spent years driving Firebirds, GTOs, and Grand Prix models, but as those customers grew older, their priorities shifted. They still wanted a stylish car, but they also wanted comfort. They wanted power, but they didn't want to feel every bump on the road. They wanted a car that looked and felt expensive, something they could be proud of. Pontiac had always positioned itself as the performance division of General Motors, but now it was stepping into unfamiliar territory. Could it create a car that delivered luxury without losing its signature Pontiac personality? Aiming for the top, Pontiac's vision for luxury General Motors had experience in the luxury market, but Pontiac had never truly competed at the highest level. The company studied what made a car feel luxurious. It wasn't just about adding leather seats or more chrome. It was about the entire driving experience. Luxury cars had longer wheelbases for a smoother ride, softer suspensions to absorb road imperfections, and quieter cabins with advanced soundproofing. Everything from the steering feel to the button placement on the dashboard was designed to make driving effortless. Pontiac engineers and designers worked to combine these elements with Pontiac's signature styling. They knew they couldn't just copy Cadillac or Lincoln. That would be a mistake. Instead, they wanted to create something unique, a car that would appeal to drivers who had outgrown muscle cars but still wanted something with character. The result? Pontiac's most ambitious luxury car ever, a bold new design, prestige on wheels. The first thing people noticed about this car was its commanding presence. Unlike the aggressive, low-slung look of Pontiac's performance models, this car had a more elegant, upscale appearance. It was longer, wider, and more refined. The bold front grille, accented with chrome, gave it a stately look, the kind of car you'd expect to see outside a high-end hotel or a business executive's driveway. The sleek body lines were carefully sculpted to give an impression of power without looking too aggressive. It was clear that Pontiac wanted this car to turn heads, but for different reasons than its muscle cars did. The car sat on a stretched wheelbase, giving it a more balanced and planted feel on the road. The design wasn't just about looks. It was about delivering a driving experience that felt smooth, controlled, and effortless. Buyers stepping inside were greeted by an interior that was unlike anything Pontiac had ever built before, a cabin of pure comfort, luxury like never before inside. Pontiac made it clear that this car was built for comfort, not just speed. The seats were wrapped in the finest leather, offering plush cushioning that made even long-distance drives feel effortless. Unlike the stiff, bolstered seats found in Pontiac's performance models, these seats were designed for relaxation, with power-adjustable controls and memory settings to give drivers the perfect position. The dashboard was a masterpiece of design and technology. A digital instrument cluster, something rare for the time, gave drivers a futuristic experience. The controls were ergonomically placed, with soft-touch materials replacing the hard plastics found in lower-tier models. The wood grain trim and chrome accents gave the cabin a refined, sophisticated feel. Pontiac didn't just stop at materials. It packed this car with advanced features. Buyers were treated to automatic climate control, set the temperature once and let the car handle the rest. Premium sound system, designed to deliver rich, crystal-clear audio throughout the cabin. Soft closed doors, a detail typically found in high-end luxury cars. Power everything, windows, seats, mirrors, and even an early version of keyless entry. Everything about the interior was designed to make driving more enjoyable and less stressful. No longer did Pontiac drivers have to sacrifice comfort for style. They could now have both. The engineering behind the drive, smooth, silent, and powerful under the hood, Pontiac wanted to ensure that performance wasn't forgotten. After all, this was still a Pontiac. The car came with a large displacement V8 engine, tuned not for raw speed but for effortless power delivery. Acceleration was smooth, not aggressive. The goal wasn't to launch from 0-60 in record time, but to glide onto highways with minimal effort. The powertrain was matched with a refined transmission that delivered shifts so smooth they were barely noticeable. Pontiac engineers paid special attention to ride quality. A soft suspension setup absorbed road imperfections, making even rough roads feel smooth. Special soundproofing materials were used throughout the cabin, ensuring that wind and road noise were kept to a minimum. Drivers could now enjoy a quiet, relaxing experience, something Pontiac had never truly focused on before. Pontiac had stepped into a new league with this car. It was no longer just about performance or affordability. It was about creating an experience, a car that made drivers feel confident, comfortable, and in control. But as Pontiac soon learned, entering the luxury market wasn't just about building a great car. It was about convincing buyers that it deserved to be there. Would Pontiac's loyal customers embrace this new direction? Or was this a step too far from its roots? Pontiac had built the most refined, most advanced car in its history. It was packed with premium materials, cutting-edge technology, and a driving experience designed for comfort rather than raw power. On paper, it had everything needed to challenge Cadillac, Lincoln, and even European luxury brands. But building a luxury car was one thing, convincing buyers was another. For decades, Pontiac had been the brand of performance, speed, and rebellion. It was the choice of muscle car enthusiasts, street racers, and those who wanted an exciting drive. Pontiac's identity was deeply rooted in cars like the GTO, Firebird, and Trans Am. These were machines built to stand out, to demand attention, to be loud, not just in sound but in presence. Now Pontiac was asking its loyal customers to embrace something different. This wasn't a car built for burnouts or quarter-mile races. It wasn't meant to be flashy in the traditional Pontiac sense. Instead, it was elegant, smooth, and refined. It was a Pontiac that didn't feel like a Pontiac. The marketing dilemma? Who was this car really for? Pontiac knew that entering the luxury market meant targeting an entirely different type of buyer. But there was a problem. The luxury segment was already dominated by established names. Cadillac had built a reputation for opulence and prestige. Lincoln was known for its smooth, effortless cruisers. Even Buick had positioned itself as a step up from Chevrolet, offering a balance of luxury and affordability. Pontiac, on the other hand, had no history in this space. Buyers didn't associate the brand with refined luxury. Would they really be willing to pay a premium price for a Pontiac? There was also another challenge: Pontiac's existing customers. The people who had spent years driving GTOs, Firebirds, and Grand Prix models loved the brand for its aggressive styling and raw performance. Would they accept this shift toward comfort and elegance? Or would they feel like Pontiac was abandoning its identity? Pontiac's marketing team had a difficult task. Who was the target buyer? Was it the loyal Pontiac enthusiast who had aged out of muscle cars and wanted something more refined? Or was it the Cadillac and Lincoln buyer who might be willing to take a chance on something different? To appeal to both, Pontiac positioned this car as luxury with an edge. The advertisements highlighted its refined interior and smooth ride, but they also emphasized that it still had Pontiac DNA. It wasn't just another soft, uninspired luxury sedan. It was a car that offered both prestige and personality, or at least that was the message Pontiac wanted to send. The public reaction: a mixed response. When the car finally hit dealerships, the reaction was divided. Some buyers were impressed. They loved the elegant design, the premium interior, and the advanced features. For Pontiac customers who had outgrown muscle cars but still wanted a stylish ride, this was a dream come true. It gave them a way to stay loyal to the brand while upgrading to something more sophisticated, but not everyone was convinced. Traditional Pontiac fans felt like the brand had lost its way. They wanted aggressive styling, bold performance, and a car that felt exciting to drive. This new Pontiac luxury car was too smooth, too quiet, too restrained. It didn't have the same rebellious spirit that Pontiac had built its reputation on. Even in the luxury market, the car faced challenges. Cadillac and Lincoln buyers weren't easily swayed. Pontiac had built something impressive, but luxury buyers were brand conscious. When people wanted prestige, they went to Cadillac, Lincoln, or Mercedes-Benz, not Pontiac. No matter how refined or well-equipped the car was, it still had a Pontiac badge on the grille. And for some, that simply wasn't enough. The performance question: did it still feel like a Pontiac? Pontiac had worked hard to ensure that this car wasn't just another soft, uninspired luxury sedan. Beneath the quiet ride and plush interior, it still had a powerful V8 engine capable of delivering strong acceleration when needed. The car wasn't built for high-speed thrills, but it had more than enough power to feel confident on the road. The suspension was tuned for comfort, but Pontiac engineers made sure it didn't feel too disconnected. The steering had a precise, well-weighted feel, giving drivers a sense of control. It wasn't as sharp as a Firebird or a Grand Prix, but it wasn't as floaty as a traditional luxury car either. It struck a balance, refined but with just enough Pontiac character to remind drivers of the brand's performance heritage. But that raised a bigger question. Was a balance really what buyers wanted? Muscle car fans wanted excitement. Luxury buyers wanted effortless elegance. This Pontiac sat somewhere in the middle, and that middle ground made it difficult to define. The sales struggle, a harsh reality. Pontiac had put everything into making this car a success. It had the technology, the comfort, and the prestige Pontiac had never attempted before. But the numbers told a different story. Sales were disappointing. Pontiac enthusiasts weren't fully on board with the shift toward luxury. Luxury buyers weren't willing to take a chance on a brand known for muscle cars. And in the end, this car, Pontiac's most luxurious effort, struggled to find an audience. It wasn't that the car was bad. In fact, by most accounts, it was well built and offered a great driving experience. But it was caught between two worlds, trying to please two very different types of buyers. And in doing so, it failed to truly win over either side. Pontiac had stepped into the luxury market with confidence, but the reality was harsh. Building a great luxury car wasn't enough. Winning buyers' trust, changing perceptions, and competing against established luxury brands required more than just a bold attempt. And as the years went by, Pontiac's struggle to redefine itself only became more apparent. The luxury car market had always been a battlefield where only the strongest survived. Cadillac and Lincoln had decades of experience in this space. European brands like Mercedes-Benz and BMW had built reputations on precision engineering and high stock appeal. Pontiac? It was the underdog. It was trying to fight its way into a market that wasn't just about features and performance. It was about legacy, perception, and long-term trust. Pontiac's attempt at luxury wasn't just about selling a car. It was about convincing people to change how they saw the brand, and that was a much harder battle to win. The brand identity crisis. A car without a clear home. One of the biggest challenges Pontiac faced was its identity crisis. For years, Pontiac had built its reputation on excitement. It was the brand of muscle, speed, and youthful energy. It had built icons, the GTO, the Trans Am, the Firebird, cars that appealed to drivers who wanted an adrenaline rush every time they hit the gas pedal. But this luxury car? It wasn't built for the street racers or the muscle car crowd. It was made for comfort, for long highway cruises, for executives and professionals who valued refinement over raw power. The problem? Those kinds of buyers didn't see Pontiac as a luxury brand. They saw it as a performance brand, a company that built fast, aggressive cars, not smooth, elegant sedans. And when it came time to choose a luxury car, they didn't think about Pontiac. They thought about Cadillac, Lincoln, Mercedes, and BMW. Meanwhile, Pontiac's loyal fans were confused. They had spent years associating Pontiac with bold styling, big horsepower, and rebellious spirit. Now, Pontiac was asking them to embrace a softer, quieter, more mature version of the brand. Some were willing to give it a chance, but many weren't. And that created the worst possible scenario, a car that didn't have a clear audience. It wasn't luxury enough to steal buyers from Cadillac and Mercedes, and it wasn't exciting enough to keep Pontiac's traditional fan base happy. It was stuck in the middle, struggling to find its place. The pricing problem. Was it worth the money? Price played another major role in the car's struggle. Pontiac's new luxury model wasn't cheap. It was one of the most expensive Pontiacs ever made. And that raised an important question. Was it worth it? For decades, Pontiac had been known for offering performance at an affordable price. It was the brand that gave buyers the thrill of a muscle car without breaking the bank. But luxury was a different game. Luxury buyers expected a certain level of prestige when they spent a premium price. They wanted an exclusive experience, a name that carried weight. Cadillac, Lincoln, and Mercedes had that prestige. Pontiac, it didn't. And for Pontiac's traditional buyers, the price was a shock. They were used to Pontiac's pricing being reasonable, affordable performance. Now, Pontiac was asking them to pay a premium price for luxury, something that didn't align with what they expected from the brand. It was a tough sell on both sides. Luxury buyers didn't trust the Pontiac name, and Pontiac's loyal fans didn't see the value in paying Cadillac-level money for a Pontiac. Dealer struggles, selling luxury in the wrong showroom. Another major issue was Pontiac dealerships. Pontiac's network of dealerships had spent decades selling performance cars and budget-friendly sedans. They knew how to sell excitement. They knew how to sell speed, but selling luxury? That was an entirely different skill set. Luxury cars weren't just about horsepower or handling, they were about status, comfort, and prestige. Customers who walked into a Cadillac or Mercedes dealership expected a different buying experience. Polished showrooms, well-dressed salespeople, and a sense of exclusivity. Pontiac dealerships weren't set up for that. Many Pontiac dealers struggled to sell the new luxury model because they didn't know how to market it to the right buyers. They were used to customers looking for raw power and affordability, not plush leather seats and quiet rides. And for luxury buyers who did visit Pontiac dealerships, many were disappointed. The experience didn't match the price. They were expecting the Cadillac or Lincoln treatment. Instead, they got the same Pontiac showroom experience that had sold muscle cars and economy sedans for decades. It was another hurdle Pontiac hadn't fully anticipated. Changing times. The shift away from big luxury cars. Even if Pontiac had done everything right, there was another force working against it: the changing car market. By the time Pontiac introduced its most luxurious car, the American auto industry was shifting away from large, high-end sedans. The economy was struggling, gas prices were rising, buyers were starting to look for smaller, more fuel-efficient cars instead of big, heavy luxury cruisers. At the same time, Japanese automakers were making a strong push into the market. Toyota, Honda, and Nissan were offering well-built, reliable cars that undercut American brands on price while still delivering solid performance. Even in the luxury space, brands like Lexus and Acura were starting to emerge, offering a new kind of prestige, one based on advanced engineering rather than just size and power. Pontiac's luxury model was introduced at the wrong time. It was built for an era that was already fading. The days of massive, fuel-hungry luxury sedans were coming to an end, and Pontiac's attempt at competing in that space was arriving just as the demand was shrinking. The final blow, a car that faded into history. In the end, Pontiac's luxury experiment was a bold but unsuccessful attempt. The car itself wasn't bad. It was well designed, comfortable, and advanced for its time, but it faced too many obstacles. Pontiac's identity crisis made it difficult to market. Buyers didn't associate Pontiac with luxury, making it hard to gain traction in the high-end market. The pricing didn't align with expectations, driving away both traditional Pontiac fans and luxury buyers. Dealerships weren't equipped to sell a high-end model, leading to weak sales efforts. The market was changing, and large American luxury sedans were losing popularity. Pontiac had tried to reinvent itself. It had built a car that was supposed to elevate the brand to a new level. But the truth was clear. Pontiac's strength wasn't in luxury. It was in performance, in excitement, in cars that made hearts race. And while this luxury model was a fascinating chapter in Pontiac's history, it was a chapter that quickly closed. The car faded from showrooms, sales remained underwhelming, and Pontiac eventually returned to what it did best, building performance cars that thrilled drivers. But looking back, Pontiac's luxury attempt remains an important lesson. It showed that even great cars can fail if they don't align with what people expect from a brand. It proved that luxury isn't just about materials and features, it's about identity, reputation, and perception. Pontiac built its most luxurious car ever, but in the end, luxury alone wasn't enough. The aftermath, what went wrong and what Pontiac learned. Pontiac's attempt at entering the luxury market didn't just fail, it left behind valuable lessons about branding, consumer perception, and the harsh realities of the automotive industry. The car itself wasn't necessarily bad. In fact, on paper it had everything it needed to compete. But in reality, it was fighting against forces that no amount of chrome, plush leather, or technology could overcome. For Pontiac, this wasn't just a failed model. It was a wake-up call, a realization that the market dictated success, not just ambition. And for car lovers, it became a case study in what happens when a brand strays too far from its core identity. Reputation over innovation, why luxury buyers didn't bite. In the world of high-end cars, prestige matters as much as performance. Buyers don't just want features, they want a name that commands respect. Luxury isn't just about what's inside the car, it's about what it says about the person driving it. And that was Pontiac's biggest problem. Cadillac had spent decades crafting an image of American luxury and success. Lincoln had done the same. Even foreign brands like Mercedes, BMW, and Jaguar had built their reputations on heritage, refinement, and exclusivity. Pontiac? It was known for street power, muscle cars, and affordable performance. That was its strength. But that same strength worked against it in the luxury market. Even though Pontiac's high-end model had the technology, comfort, and build quality, it lacked the one thing it couldn't manufacture overnight: prestige. Consumers willing to spend top dollar on a luxury car weren't looking for the best deal. They were looking for a brand that reflected their status. And no matter how well built Pontiac's luxury model was, it didn't carry the social weight of a Cadillac or a Mercedes-Benz. For Pontiac's usual customers, it was the opposite problem. They had grown up associating the brand with powerful engines, aggressive styling, and thrilling drives. A high-end luxury car didn't fit the image they loved. Pontiac had built a car that appealed to neither group. It wasn't prestigious enough for luxury buyers and wasn't thrilling enough for its loyal fans. The high price of risk, why Pontiac couldn't afford another mistake. The automotive industry is unforgiving. One misstep can cost millions. For Pontiac, this luxury gamble wasn't just a creative risk, it was a financial one. Developing a luxury car meant massive investments in engineering, materials, and production. It meant convincing dealerships to stock and push a product that didn't fit their usual sales strategies. It meant launching expensive marketing campaigns to rebrand Pontiac as something more than just a performance automaker. And when the sales didn't come, that money was gone. This wasn't just about one car failing, it was about what that failure meant for Pontiac's future. Every dollar spent on this model could have been spent on revamping their performance lineup, improving existing models, or investing in emerging technologies. Instead, Pontiac had to deal with the reality of a high-end car that wasn't moving off showroom floors. Pontiac couldn't afford another failure like this, and the executives knew it. That's why they never made another attempt at breaking into the luxury market again. The shifting market. Why big American luxury cars were dying. Timing is everything. And Pontiac's luxury experiment came at the worst possible time. During the era of massive land yachts and oversized luxury sedans, American automakers dominated the high-end market. But by the time Pontiac released its most luxurious car, consumer preferences were changing. Gas prices were rising. People were starting to question whether they needed massive, fuel-hungry sedans when smaller, more efficient cars were becoming available. Imports were gaining traction. Brands like Lexus and Acura were proving that luxury could be delivered with reliability and advanced engineering, not just size and chrome. Technology was shifting. Features that once defined luxury, power windows, digital dashboards, and plush seats were becoming common in mid-range vehicles. Buyers didn't need to spend luxury money to get high-end comfort anymore. Pontiac's car was designed for an era that was fading fast. It was big, heavy, and built for long, comfortable drives at a time when buyers were looking for efficiency, reliability, and cutting-edge technology. The final blow? Pontiac's decline was already beginning. Though Pontiac's luxury car was a misstep, it wasn't the reason the brand ultimately disappeared, but it was a sign of deeper problems. In the years that followed, Pontiac struggled to find its footing. The brand had always thrived when it stuck to performance and excitement. But as the automotive industry changed, it struggled to keep up. SUVs were taking over. The rise of sport utility vehicles changed the game. Buyers were shifting away from sedans, and Pontiac had no real strong presence in the SUV market. Muscle cars weren't enough. Pontiac's legacy was built on fast, powerful cars, but as safety regulations and fuel efficiency became bigger concerns, muscle cars weren't selling the way they once did. GM had bigger priorities. General Motors was focusing on Cadillac, Chevrolet, and Buick, leaving Pontiac with fewer resources to innovate and compete. By the early 2000s, Pontiac was losing its identity. It was no longer the performance king of the road, and it had already proven it couldn't break into the luxury market. And in 2009, after decades of struggle, GM made the decision that car enthusiasts still talk about today. Pontiac was officially discontinued. The legacy of Pontiac's luxury attempt, a cautionary tale looking back. Pontiac's most luxurious car wasn't just a failed model. It was a lesson about branding, consumer expectations, and the risks of trying to be something you're not. It proved that luxury isn't just about features, it's about reputation. It showed that even a well-built car can fail if it doesn't align with what people expect from the brand. It reminded the auto industry that taking a risk can come at a cost, especially when that risk is outside your comfort zone. Pontiac never made another luxury car again, and perhaps that was for the best. Pontiac wasn't meant to be a luxury brand. It was meant to be a performance brand, a company that built cars with soul, speed, and excitement. And while its most luxurious model may have faded into history, Pontiac's true identity still lives on, in the hearts of car lovers who remember the GTO, the Firebird, and the Trans Am. Because at the end of the day, Pontiac wasn't about luxury, it was about passion. And that's what made it truly unforgettable. The end of Pontiac wasn't just about one failed luxury car. It was about a series of decisions, market changes, and corporate struggles that sealed its fate long before the brand was officially shut down. At its core, Pontiac was built on performance, excitement, and innovation. It had carved out a space in the American auto industry as the go-to brand for affordable power. From the legendary GTO to the Firebird and Trans Am, Pontiac wasn't just another car company, it was a movement. But as time went on, Pontiac started to lose the very identity that made it special. And by the time GM decided to pull the plug, the writing had been on the wall for years. The corporate struggles, why GM's decisions hurt Pontiac. One of the biggest factors that led to Pontiac's downfall was General Motors itself. GM was one of the most powerful automakers in the world, but its size became one of its greatest weaknesses. Too many brands, too much overlap. GM wasn't just running Pontiac, it had Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, GMC, Saturn, Oldsmobile, and more. Many of these brands competed against each other, which meant Pontiac had to fight for attention and funding within its own company, a focus on cost-cutting instead of innovation. By the 1990s and early 2000s, GM had become more focused on saving money than pushing boundaries. Instead of giving Pontiac the resources to develop exciting new cars, GM forced it to recycle parts and platforms from other divisions. No clear vision. Pontiac was once known for making bold, aggressive cars, but GM's leadership didn't seem to know what they wanted Pontiac to be anymore. Was it a muscle car brand? A sporty alternative to Chevrolet? A mainstream competitor to Toyota and Honda? The lack of direction confused both customers and dealerships. Instead of being allowed to evolve naturally, Pontiac was forced into a corner. It had the potential to thrive, but GM's internal struggles prevented it from doing so. The changing market. When muscle cars weren't enough, Pontiac's greatest strength was also its biggest weakness. It had built its reputation on fast, powerful cars, but by the late 1990s, the market was shifting. The rise of SUVs. American buyers were moving away from sports cars and sedans. They wanted larger, more practical vehicles, and Pontiac didn't have a strong SUV lineup to compete. While brands like Ford and Chevrolet dominated the SUV boom, Pontiac was left behind. Performance regulations. The golden age of muscle cars had been fueled by big engines and raw horsepower, but by the 2000s, new safety and emissions standards made it harder for Pontiac to build the same kind of high-performance cars it was known for. Import competition. Japanese and European brands were gaining ground in the performance market. Cars like the Nissan 350Z, BMW M3, and Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution were proving that speed and handling didn't have to come with a massive V8 engine. Pontiac's old formula wasn't working as well as it once did. For decades, Pontiac had dominated the streets with roaring engines and aggressive styling, but the automotive world was changing, and Pontiac was struggling to change with it. The branding crisis. When Pontiac lost its identity. A brand is more than just a name. It's a promise to customers. It tells them what to expect. And for decades, Pontiac's promise was simple: exciting, powerful cars that stood out from the crowd. But as the years went on, Pontiac lost that identity. Instead of sticking to its strengths, it tried to be too many things at once. The Grand Am and Grand Prix became generic. These were once Pontiac's most exciting sedans, but by the 2000s they had become nothing more than rebranded Chevrolet models with minor styling changes. The power and personality that made them special had disappeared. The Aztek disaster. Pontiac tried to get into the SUV market with the Pontiac Aztek, but instead of being a game changer, it became one of the most infamous design failures in automotive history. Instead of helping Pontiac grow, it hurt the brand's reputation even more. The GTO revival didn't work. In an attempt to bring back its muscle car roots, Pontiac introduced a new GTO in 2004, but instead of being an instant classic, it was met with mixed reactions. It was powerful, but it didn't have the bold styling and aggressive presence that fans expected. Pontiac was losing its unique appeal. It wasn't standing out anymore, and in a crowded market, if you don't stand out, you fade away. The financial collapse, the final nail in the coffin. By the late 2000s, GM was in serious trouble. The company had been struggling for years, but when the 2008 financial crisis hit, everything fell apart. Plummeting sales. The global recession meant fewer people were buying new cars, and GM's sales dropped dramatically. Bankruptcy and government bailout. GM was losing billions of dollars, and in 2009 it had to be bailed out by the U.S. government. As part of the bailout, GM had to cut costs and eliminate weaker brands. Pontiac was sacrificed. GM decided to shut down Pontiac, along with Saturn, Hummer, and Saab, to focus on its core brands. It wasn't necessarily that Pontiac was the weakest, it was just one of the easiest to cut in a time of crisis. After over 80 years of building cars that Americans love, Pontiac was officially discontinued in 2010. The end of an era, but not the end of Pontiac's legacy. Pontiac may be gone, but its spirit lives on. The GTO, Firebird, and Trans Am are still celebrated by car enthusiasts. Pontiac clubs, car shows, and restoration projects keep the brand's legacy alive. And even today, when people see a classic Pontiac on the road, they stop and admire it. Because Pontiac wasn't just about cars. It was about passion, power, and the thrill of the drive. GM may have shut the doors on Pontiac, but for those who lived through its golden years, the brand will never be forgotten. Pontiac's greatest strength became its biggest weakness. For decades, Pontiac thrived on a simple formula: power, style, and affordability. It was the car for people who wanted excitement without paying a premium price. From the streets to the drag strips, Pontiac models like the GTO, Firebird, and Grand Prix delivered the kind of adrenaline rush that car lovers craved. But the same strengths that made Pontiac a legend also made it vulnerable. The automotive industry was changing, and the things that once made Pontiac special were no longer enough to keep it alive. The shift in American tastes, why Pontiac fell behind for much of the 20th century. American car buyers wanted big, bold, and powerful. Pontiac delivered exactly that. But by the 1000, 990S, and 2000S, consumer priorities were shifting. Fuel efficiency over horsepower, gas prices were climbing, and buyers were becoming more conscious of fuel economy. A big V8 engine might have been a selling point in the 1000, 960S, and 70S, but by the 2000S, many buyers wanted smaller, more efficient engines that could go further on a tank of gas. Pontiac was slow to adapt, still focused on performance in a world where efficiency mattered more. Luxury and refinement. The average car buyer wasn't just looking for speed anymore. They wanted a quiet, comfortable, and well-built car. Brands like Lexus, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz set new standards for quality, while even mainstream brands like Honda and Toyota raised expectations. Pontiac, with its aging interiors and hard plastics, couldn't compete in this new world. The dominance of SUVs. Pontiac built its reputation on sedans and muscle cars. But by the early 2000 SUVs and crossovers, Ford had the Explorer, Chevrolet had the Tahoe, and Honda had the CR-V. Pontiac had the Aztek, a model that failed so badly it became a punchline. While other brands evolved, Pontiac was stuck in the past. It wasn't adapting fast enough, and as a result, it was slowly losing relevance. The quality problem. Why Pontiac lost consumer trust? Pontiac's decline wasn't just about changing market trends. It was also about quality issues that hurt its reputation. For years, Pontiac cars were known for their aggressive styling and powerful engines, but they also developed a reputation for cheap interiors, electrical problems, and mechanical issues. Plastic interiors. By the 2000s, Pontiac's interiors looked and felt outdated. Hard plastics, cheap materials, and uninspired designs made Pontiac cars feel lower quality compared to their competitors. Reliability concerns. Many Pontiac models suffered from engine problems, transmission failures, and electrical issues. Car buyers started to see Pontiac as a brand that built cars that were fun to drive, but not built to last. Resale value dropped. Because of these issues, Pontiac vehicles started losing value faster than their competitors. This made people hesitant to buy new Pontiacs, knowing they wouldn't hold their value over time. When a brand loses consumer trust, it's hard to recover. And for Pontiac, that trust was fading year by year. The GTO revival, a missed opportunity. In 2004, Pontiac tried to bring back one of its most iconic nameplates, the GTO. The original GTO had defined the muscle car era, so the revival had a lot of expectations to meet. But instead of being a roaring success, the new GTO was met with disappointment. It lacked the aggressive styling. The original GTO had a presence that turned heads. But the 2004 model, based on the Holden Monaro from Australia, had a design that looked too plain and generic. It didn't stand out like a true muscle car should. It was expensive. The new GTO wasn't cheap. While it had a powerful 400 horsepower LS2 V8, its high price tag put it in competition with Chevrolet's Corvette, a car that had a stronger reputation. Many buyers chose the Corvette instead. Limited sales. Pontiac hoped the GTO would reignite excitement around the brand, but sales were far lower than expected. Instead of being the car that saved Pontiac, it became another reminder that the brand was struggling to connect with modern buyers. The GTO revival had potential, but it didn't deliver what Pontiac fans really wanted, a bold, aggressive muscle car that captured the spirit of the original. Pontiac's final hope, the G8. By the late 2000s, Pontiac was running out of time. It needed a car that could prove it still had a place in the industry. That car was the Pontiac G8. It had real performance. The G8 was powerful, rear-wheel drive, and packed with a V8 engine. It was one of the best driving Pontiacs in years, proving that the brand could still build exciting cars. It looked aggressive. Unlike the GTO, the G8 had a design that stood out. It had the muscular lines and bold styling that Pontiac fans loved. It was well received by critics. Car reviewers praised the G8 for its handling, performance, and overall driving experience. It felt like Pontiac was finally getting back on track. But just as the G8 was starting to make an impact, it was too late. The 2008 financial crisis hit, GM went bankrupt, and Pontiac was shut down before the G8 had a chance to succeed. What could have saved Pontiac? Looking back, there were a few things that could have saved Pontiac from its fate. A clearer brand identity. If Pontiac had focused on being a true performance brand instead of making generic sedans, it might have stood out more in the market. Better quality control. If Pontiac had improved its interiors and reliability, it could have competed better against Japanese and European brands. An SUV that actually worked? If Pontiac had developed a successful SUV instead of the Aztek, it might have stayed relevant as the market shifted. But by the time Pontiac tried to make a comeback, it was too little, too late. The damage had been done. And when GM needed to make cuts, Pontiac was an easy target. The final goodbye Pontiac didn't die because people stopped loving it. It died because corporate mismanagement, changing trends, and quality issues made it impossible to survive. Even though Pontiac is gone, it left behind a legacy that still lives on today. Every time a classic GTO, Firebird, or Trans Am roars down the street, people remember what Pontiac stood for. It may have disappeared from showrooms, but in the hearts of car lovers, Pontiac will never be forgotten. Pontiac's legacy, a brand that refused to be forgotten, even though Pontiac's time as an active car manufacturer came to an end, its name still carries a certain magic. The excitement, the power, and the attitude Pontiac represented didn't just vanish overnight. Instead, it became part of automotive history, a brand that people still talk about with a sense of nostalgia and admiration. It's not just about the cars Pontiac built, it's about what they meant to people. For generations of drivers, Pontiac wasn't just another car brand. It was a symbol of freedom, speed, and American ingenuity. Whether it was a GTO rumbling at a stoplight, a Firebird tearing down the highway, or a Grand Prix cruising through town, Pontiac cars had a presence that couldn't be ignored. But as time passed, the automotive world moved on. Pontiac was no longer in showrooms, no longer on the production lines. So why is it that even today, people still feel such a deep connection to these cars? The collector's market. Why Pontiac's value is rising. When Pontiac was shut down, something unexpected happened. Instead of fading away, the brand's most legendary models became even more desirable. Classic muscle cars saw a surge in value. Models like the 1969 GTO Judge, the Firebird Trans Am, and the 1977 Bandit Edition Trans Am became highly sought after by collectors. Prices at auctions started climbing, with some of these cars selling for six figures. The final Pontiac models became instant classics. Cars like the Pontiac G8 GXP and Solstice GXP Coupe were rare when they were new, and their value has only increased over time. With Pontiac gone, these cars became the last of their kind, a final reminder of what the brand was capable of. Restorations and custom builds kept Pontiac alive. Across the country, car enthusiasts were restoring and modifying classic Pontiacs, keeping their legacy alive. Whether it was a factory-accurate restoration or a resto mod with modern performance upgrades, Pontiac cars were still turning heads. The market spoke for itself. Pontiac wasn't just another defunct car brand. It was a piece of automotive history that people refused to let go of. Hollywood and pop culture, Pontiac's lasting impact. One reason Pontiac remains so deeply embedded in people's memories is its role in pop culture. Unlike other brands that faded into obscurity, Pontiac had its share of iconic Hollywood moments that cemented its place in history. The Bandit's Trans Am, Smokey and the Bandit. 1977, when Burt Reynolds drove a black and gold 1977 Pontiac Trans Am in the legendary film Pontiac, became a cultural phenomenon. Sales skyrocketed, and to this day, that car remains one of the most recognizable muscle cars ever built. Knight Rider's KITT, the high-tech Firebird. The 1982 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am became a household name when it was transformed into KITT, the intelligent talking car in the TV series Knight Rider. For an entire generation, Pontiac represented cutting-edge technology and style. The GTO in XXX, 2002. When Vin Diesel's character drove a 1967 Pontiac GTO, it reminded younger audiences of just how cool Pontiac once was. Even Breaking Bad gave Pontiac a spotlight. Walter White's Pontiac Aztek may not have been a performance car, but it became famous in its own way, representing the decline of a man who had once been full of promise, just like Pontiac itself. Pontiac wasn't just a car brand, it was a piece of American culture. Even years after its closure, its most famous models still make appearances in movies, TV shows, and video games, keeping its legacy alive for new generations. The fans who keep Pontiac alive car brands come and go, but few have fan communities as passionate as Pontiac's. Even after General Motors shut the brand down, Pontiac lovers refuse to let it be forgotten. Pontiac car clubs thrive across the world. From local meetups to massive national gatherings, Pontiac clubs continue to bring together enthusiasts who share a deep love for the brand. Events like the Pontiac Nationals and Trans Am Nationals draw massive crowds every year. Online forums and social media groups keep the conversation going. Websites like Pontiac GTO Forum, Trans Am Country, and Performance Years remain active, with owners sharing restoration tips, performance upgrades, and memories of their favorite Pontiac moments. Pontiac parts and reproduction companies ensure the cars stay on the road. Companies specializing in classic Pontiac parts have helped keep these vehicles running. Even though Pontiac isn't making new cars, its classics are still being restored, modified, and enjoyed by car enthusiasts worldwide. The love for Pontiac didn't disappear with the brand shut down. It only grew stronger. When a brand creates cars that inspire people, those cars don't just become machines. They become stories, memories, and passions that never fade away. Could Pontiac ever make a comeback? With Pontiac's legacy still alive in the hearts of car lovers, the question remains, could it ever return? General Motors still owns the Pontiac name, and in recent years other discontinued brands have made surprising comebacks. The Hummer name was revived as an electric vehicle, and Ford brought back the Bronco after a long absence. Could Pontiac get the same treatment? Muscle cars are making a resurgence. The Dodge Challenger and Charger, the Chevrolet Camaro, and the Ford Mustang have all proven that classic American performance cars still have a place in today's market. If Pontiac were to return, it would likely have to bring back an iconic name like the GTO or Firebird to make an impact. Electric performance cars are the future. If Pontiac were revived, it would have to embrace the shift toward electric vehicles. Could we see an electric Trans Am or a modern GTO powered by high-performance electric motors? The challenge of competing with GM's other brands. One reason Pontiac was shut down was that General Motors had too many brands competing against each other. With Chevrolet still dominating the performance car segment, it's unclear if there's enough room for Pontiac to return. But even if Pontiac never returns as a new car brand, its legacy is secure. The cars it left behind continue to thrill enthusiasts, turn heads on the road, and remind us of a time when Pontiac stood for excitement, power, and passion. Despite Pontiac's undeniable impact on the automotive world, its final years were filled with uncertainty, corporate restructuring, and ultimately, an abrupt ending that left many enthusiasts heartbroken. The brand that once represented American muscle, luxury, and performance found itself struggling to keep up with an industry that was rapidly changing. At the heart of Pontiac's downfall was a combination of corporate decisions, financial struggles, and a shift in consumer preferences. General Motors, Pontiac's parent company, had been facing mounting financial difficulties for years, and as the global economy entered a downturn in the late 2000s, the pressure only intensified. GM was forced to make tough choices, and unfortunately, Pontiac was caught in the crossfire. The beginning of the end, GM's restructuring and Pontiac's decline. Pontiac's troubles didn't appear overnight. The warning signs had been there for years, hidden beneath declining sales figures and an identity crisis that left the brand struggling to define itself. From muscle to mediocrity, Pontiac had always been known for exciting, performance-driven cars, but by the late 1990s and early 2000s, many of its models had lost their edge. Cars like the Grand Am, Bonneville, and Sunfire lacked the aggressive styling and raw power that once made Pontiac famous, while models like the GTO and G8 attempted to bring back the brand's performance heritage. They arrived too late to reverse the damage. The downfall of the sedan era? Pontiac had once been a leader in the sedan market, offering stylish and powerful options like the Grand Prix and Bonneville. But as consumer preferences shifted towards SUVs and trucks, sales suffered. Meanwhile, competitors like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan dominated the midsize and full-size car segments, leaving Pontiac struggling to find its place. Too many overlapping models. General Motors had multiple brands competing within the same segments, and Pontiac often found itself positioned awkwardly between Chevrolet, Buick, and Cadillac. Many Pontiac models shared platforms and engines with Chevrolet vehicles, leading consumers to choose Chevy's more affordable and widely recognized options instead. By the early 2000s, Pontiac was no longer the performance icon it once was. It was a struggling brand searching for an identity, trapped between its legendary past and an uncertain future. The 2008 financial crisis, the final nail in the coffin, the turning point for Pontiac and General Motors as a whole, came with the 2008 global financial crisis. The auto industry was hit hard, and GM found itself on the brink of bankruptcy. To stay afloat, the company needed a massive government bailout, but there was a catch. GM had to restructure its operations, cutting costs wherever possible. Pontiac wasn't profitable enough to survive, while Pontiac had a loyal fan base. Its sales numbers didn't justify its existence. General Motors needed to streamline its lineup, and Pontiac, along with brands like Saturn, Hummer, and Saab, was deemed non-essential. The focus shifted to Chevrolet, Buick, GMC, and Cadillac. GM decided to keep only 4 core brands in North America, cutting anything that wasn't a top performer. Pontiac, once considered the company's performance division, was no longer a priority. The decision was swift and irreversible. On April 27, 2009, GM announced that Pontiac would be discontinued by the end of 2010. The news shocked the automotive world. Pontiac had been a staple of American roads for over 80 years, and now it was being phased out entirely. For enthusiasts, it felt like the end of an era. Pontiac wasn't just another car brand, it was a symbol of excitement, power, and rebellion. But corporate restructuring doesn't make decisions based on emotion, and in the eyes of GM's leadership, Pontiac had simply become expendable. The last Pontiac models. A quiet farewell with the announcement of Pontiac's discontinuation, the brand's final models rolled off the production line with little fanfare. Unlike other legendary cars that received grand send-offs, Pontiac's last moments were quiet, almost forgotten. Pontiac G6, the accidental last car. In 2010, a white 4-door Pontiac G6 was sold to a fleet customer, marking the final new Pontiac ever produced. There was no celebration, no farewell event, just a simple, unremarkable sale that closed the chapter on Pontiac's manufacturing legacy. Pontiac G8, the performance car that could have saved the brand. Many enthusiasts believe that if Pontiac had received more time, the G8 could have revived the brand. Built on an Australian Holden platform, the Pontiac G8 GXP was a true muscle sedan, packing a 6.2-liter V8 with 415 horsepower. It had everything a Pontiac should have: power, style, and a rebellious spirit, but it arrived too late. Pontiac Solstice, the forgotten roadster. The Solstice was Pontiac's attempt at a small, lightweight sports car. While it gained a cult following, it never sold in large enough numbers to make a difference. The Solstice GXP, with its turbocharged engine, was a glimpse of what Pontiac could have been in the modern sports car market. Despite these final efforts, Pontiac was finished. By the end of 2010, dealerships had cleared out their remaining stock, the factories had been repurposed, and Pontiac was no longer an active brand. What Pontiac's death meant for the automotive world, the loss of Pontiac wasn't just the end of a car brand, it was the end of an era. It marked the moment when American performance cars had to fight harder than ever to survive in a market dominated by foreign automakers, government regulations, and shifting consumer trends. It signaled the decline of affordable American muscle. Pontiac had always been about bringing performance to the masses. With the brand gone, the muscle car landscape was left to Ford's Mustang, Chevrolet's Camaro, and Dodge's Challenger. It showed that heritage alone isn't enough. Pontiac had history, passion, and an iconic lineup of past models, but that wasn't enough to save it. In the business world, numbers matter more than nostalgia. It left a hole in the car community that hasn't been filled even today. No brand has truly replaced Pontiac. Chevrolet, Dodge, and Ford have their muscle cars, but Pontiac had an identity that was entirely its own, one that hasn't been replicated. The question remains, what if? What if Pontiac had been given a second chance? What if GM had invested in a new generation of muscle cars under the Pontiac badge? Would it have survived, or was its fate already sealed long before 2008? Even though Pontiac officially shut its doors in 2010, its spirit never truly faded. For car enthusiasts, Pontiac remains more than just a name. It represents an era of bold design, raw power, and American muscle at its finest. Despite being discontinued, Pontiac's influence is still alive in the streets, in car meets, and in the hearts of those who refuse to let it be forgotten. The story of Pontiac isn't just about its demise, it's about what it left behind. Decades of innovation, legendary models, and a reputation built on speed and style ensured that Pontiac's legacy would outlive its corporate existence. The question isn't whether Pontiac mattered, it's how deeply it continues to matter even today. Pontiac's cultural impact, the brand that defined generations for many, Pontiac wasn't just a car brand, it was a way of life. From the 1960s through the early 2000s, Pontiac built cars that resonated with those who craved performance and individuality. Hollywood's love for Pontiac cars were stars in their own right. The Pontiac Trans Am from Smokey and the Bandit became one of the most iconic muscle cars in cinema history. And the Kit from Knight Rider turned the Firebird into a pop culture legend. Even decades later, these cars are instantly recognizable, proving how deeply Pontiac was woven into American entertainment. The muscle car movement, Pontiac wasn't just part of the muscle car era, it helped create it. The GTO, introduced in 1964, is widely credited as the first true muscle car. It combined a big V8 with a mid-size frame, setting a standard that competitors like Chevrolet, Ford, and Dodge had to follow. Even today, the GTO remains a symbol of American horsepower, a car that defined an entire generation. The rebellious brand, Pontiac, always had a certain attitude. It wasn't a luxury brand like Cadillac, and it wasn't as mainstream as Chevrolet. It lived in that perfect space, fast, aggressive, and built for drivers who didn't care about fitting in. Whether it was a Firebird, Grand Prix, or Bonneville, Pontiac cars were designed for those who wanted something different, something bold. But despite its lasting impact, Pontiac's absence left a void. The muscle car segment carried on, but without Pontiac, it felt like a key piece of history was missing. Pontiac's market value, how enthusiasts keep it alive. When Pontiac was discontinued, many assumed its cars would fade into obscurity. But something unexpected happened. Pontiac models became more desirable than ever. Classic Pontiacs soared in value. The moment Pontiac ceased production, collectors and enthusiasts began holding on to their cars, recognizing that they would never be made again. First-generation GTOs, Trans Ams, and Firebirds skyrocketed in price, turning them into valuable collector's items. A well-preserved 1977 Trans Am, the same model from Smokey and the Bandit, can now fetch six figures at auction. The G8 and Solstice, the last of their kind, Pontiac's final models like the G8 GXP and Solstice GXP, became instant classics. The G8, built on an Australian Holden Commodore platform, was a sleeper sedan with a 6.2L LS3 V8, and many enthusiasts believe it was one of the best American sedans ever built. The Solstice GXP, Pontiac's last sports car, gained a cult following for its turbocharged power and lightweight handling. Today, these models hold strong resale values, proving that Pontiac's final efforts didn't go unnoticed. The Firebird's undying popularity. Even though Chevrolet continues to produce the Camaro, enthusiasts still crave the Pontiac Firebird and Trans Am. The Firebird had a distinct personality, and despite the Camaro sharing its platform, fans argue that it never replaced Pontiac's version. Aftermarket companies now build Trans Am conversions, taking new Camaros and reworking them into modern interpretations of the Firebird. That speaks volumes about the lasting demand for Pontiac's unique styling and presence. Pontiac's cars didn't just disappear. They became rarer, more valuable, and more cherished by those who knew their worth. Why Pontiac could have survived a brand ahead of its time. Looking back, it's hard not to wonder, could Pontiac have been saved? If GM had made different choices, would Pontiac still be alive today? Pontiac had the right cars, but at the wrong time. The G8 GXP was a high-performance sedan that rivaled BMW's M5, and the Solstice GXP was a serious competitor to the Mazda Miata. But these cars arrived too late, during GM's financial struggles, when Pontiac was already on the chopping block. Pontiac's identity crisis hurt its survival chances. The early 2000s saw Pontiac releasing uninspired models like the Aztek, a vehicle that strayed too far from the brand's performance heritage. Instead of focusing on performance cars, Pontiac experimented with crossover SUVs at a time when it needed to reinforce its muscle car roots. If Pontiac had doubled down on performance and excitement, it might have stood a better chance. The muscle car resurgence came too late. Today, Dodge dominates the muscle car scene with the Challenger, Hellcat, Charger, and Durango SRT. Ford continues to refine the Mustang, and Chevrolet keeps improving the Camaro. But Pontiac, the brand that started it all, wasn't around to participate. If GM had invested in a modern Trans Am or GTO revival, there's little doubt that enthusiasts would have embraced it. Pontiac's death wasn't just the result of bad sales. It was a victim of timing, corporate decisions, and an industry in transition. But even though Pontiac didn't survive as a brand, its influence continues to shape the automotive world today. The Pontiac spirit, alive in enthusiasts, clubs, and custom builds. Even though Pontiac is no longer in production, its loyal fan base refuses to let it be forgotten. Pontiac car clubs keep the brand alive across the United States, Canada, and Europe. Pontiac clubs gather to celebrate the brand's greatest models. Classic GTOs, Firebirds, and Trans Am still dominate car shows, proving that Pontiac's fan base is as strong as ever. Restorations and custom builds, enthusiasts invest heavily in restoring classic Pontiacs, ensuring that these cars remain on the road for decades to come. Some take it even further. Custom shops build modern Firebirds using new Camaros, creating the Trans Am that Pontiac never got to make. Pontiac's influence in modern muscle cars, even though the Firebird and GTO are gone, their DNA lives on. The modern Camaro owes much of its aggressive styling to Pontiac's legacy. Dodge's bold approach with the Challenger is reminiscent of Pontiac's muscle car philosophy. Loud, fast, and unapologetic. Pontiac may no longer exist as a corporate entity, but it exists in spirit, in steel, and in the hearts of those who refuse to let it die. Its cars still roar down highways, its name still commands respect, and its legend continues to grow. Pontiac wasn't just another car brand, it was a revolution that even in absence still refuses to be forgotten. If Pontiac had such a strong legacy, why did it fail? The answer isn't as simple as just poor sales. Pontiac's downfall was the result of a combination of factors: corporate decisions, market shifts, economic struggles, and even bad timing. For decades, Pontiac thrived by offering something different from the rest of General Motors' lineup. It was the performance division, the rebellious brand that catered to enthusiasts. But as the automotive industry changed, Pontiac struggled to keep up. GM's corporate missteps. The beginning of the end. Pontiac's problems didn't happen overnight. They started years before the final shutdown. For much of its life, Pontiac had been an independent brand under the GM umbrella. But by the 1996, GM started stripping away that independence. Too much badge engineering. GM made the mistake of turning Pontiac into just another division with rebadged versions of Chevrolet models. Instead of unique performance cars, Pontiac's lineup started to feel like a repeat of what other GM brands were already selling. The Grand Am, Grand Prix, and Bonneville all shared too many parts with Chevys, making them less special. Loss of Pontiac's identity. Pontiac had always been about performance and excitement, but as the 1990s and early 2000s rolled in, GM shifted focus toward practicality, fuel economy, and SUVs. Instead of doubling down on muscle cars, Pontiac was forced to introduce models like the Aztek, which, despite being ahead of its time in concept, became a commercial disaster. Internal competition within GM had too many brands competing against each other. Chevrolet, Pontiac, Buick, Oldsmobile, and Cadillac were all fighting for market share within the same company. Instead of letting Pontiac flourish, GM prioritized Chevrolet as the main brand for performance vehicles, leaving Pontiac without a clear direction. Pontiac was no longer a leader, it was just another name under GM's control. And that lack of distinction hurt the brand in the long run. The economic crisis. A perfect storm. If Pontiac had been struggling for years, the 2008 financial crisis was the final blow. When the global economy crashed, automakers were hit hard, especially General Motors. GM's bankruptcy and government bailout. In 2009, GM was forced to file for bankruptcy and seek a government bailout. But the bailout came with conditions. GM had to restructure, cut costs, and eliminate weaker brands. Pontiac, Saturn, Saab, and Hummer were all axed in an effort to save the company. Why Pontiac didn't make the cut? When deciding which brands to keep, GM prioritized Chevrolet, Buick, GMC, and Cadillac. Chevrolet was the volume seller, Buick had a strong market in China, GMC was profitable with trucks and SUVs, and Cadillac was GM's luxury brand. Pontiac, despite its legacy, wasn't seen as essential. It was a performance brand in a time when fuel-efficient cars were in higher demand. The industry shift toward SUVs and crossovers. By the late 2000s, muscle cars weren't the dominant force they once were. The automotive industry was shifting towards smaller, fuel-efficient cars and larger SUVs. Pontiac, with its focus on performance sedans and coupes, didn't fit that new vision. If Pontiac had been given a chance to pivot toward performance SUVs like Dodge did with the Durango SRT, maybe things would have been different. Pontiac didn't fail because people stopped loving it. It failed because GM made it disposable in a time of crisis. What if Pontiac had survived? It's hard not to wonder, what if GM had saved Pontiac instead of cutting it? What would the brand look like today? A modern GTO and Trans Am? If Pontiac had made it past 2010, we likely would have seen modern versions of the GTO and Firebird/Trans Am. Just like how Dodge revived the Challenger and Charger, Pontiac could have brought back its most iconic muscle cars with new technology and powertrains. Imagine a supercharged V8 Trans Am rivaling the Hellcat, a car that would have captured the spirit of the original muscle car era. A high-performance sedan revolution, the Pontiac G8 was one of the best sports sedans of its time, and if Pontiac had been allowed to continue, it could have evolved into a direct competitor to Dodge's Charger or even BMW's M-Series. The G8 GXP already proved that Pontiac could build a world-class performance sedan, and a second generation could have been a game-changer. Pontiac SUVs. A missed opportunity. While Pontiac was always a performance brand, the market had shifted toward SUVs. If Pontiac had embraced high-performance crossovers, it could have followed in the footsteps of Dodge with models like the Durango SRT. A Pontiac-branded SUV with a high-horsepower V8 could have given enthusiasts a reason to stick with the brand. Pontiac had the potential to thrive in the modern market, but it never got the chance. The aftermath. Pontiac's influence today. Even though Pontiac is gone, its DNA lives on. Many of the cars we see on the road today still carry the influence of Pontiac's performance heritage. Chevrolet took over Pontiac's role, the Camaro, Corvette, and even the SS sedan picked up where Pontiac left off. The Chevy SS was essentially a rebadged Holden Commodore, the same platform used for the Pontiac G8. If Pontiac had survived, the G8 would likely still be in production today. Dodge became the true Pontiac successor. Strangely enough, Dodge is now filling the role that Pontiac once had. The Challenger and Charger embody the muscle car spirit, something Pontiac originally pioneered. Dodge's aggressive marketing and focus on raw horsepower feels very much like what Pontiac would have done if it were still around. Aftermarket builds keep Pontiac alive even though new Pontiacs aren't being made. The aftermarket world refuses to let the brand die. Companies are building modern Trans Ams out of Camaros, restoring classic Firebirds, and even engine-swapping old Pontiacs with modern LS powertrains. The passion for Pontiac hasn't faded, it has just taken on a different form. Pontiac may be gone from dealership lots, but it isn't gone from the streets. It isn't gone from car shows. It isn't gone from the hearts of those who grew up admiring these cars. Pontiac's legacy, more than just a car brand, Pontiac was never just another GM division. It was a movement, a symbol of American muscle and performance. It was for those who wanted something different, something with attitude. The first true muscle car brand, Pontiac didn't just participate in the muscle car wars, it started them. The GTO's creation in 1964 set the stage for every muscle car that followed, proving that there was a market for big power in a midsize package, a brand that defined generations. For those who grew up in the 60s and 70s, Pontiac was everywhere. For those who came of age in the 80s and 90s, Pontiac's influence was undeniable. Even younger generations today are rediscovering Pontiac's greatness through classic restorations and Hollywood nostalgia. A legend that refuses to die, Pontiac may not be making new cars, but its legacy is eternal. As long as there are enthusiasts willing to restore, modify, and celebrate these cars, Pontiac will never truly be gone. It will live on in every Firebird that rumbles down the road, in every GTO that revs its engine, and in every car lover who refuses to forget what Pontiac stood for. Pontiac wasn't just a brand, it was a legend, and legends never die. Pontiac may be gone, but its legacy is alive and well in the collector's market. In recent years, the demand for classic Pontiacs has surged. Models that once sat unnoticed on used car lots are now commanding premium prices. But why is this happening? What makes these cars so desirable today? The answer lies in a mix of nostalgia, rarity, and the undeniable appeal of American muscle. The rising demand for classic Pontiacs. There was a time when Pontiacs were seen as just another used car, but as the years passed, enthusiasts began to realize their true value. Many of these cars were scrapped, abandoned, or neglected, making well-preserved examples rarer by the day. Now, collectors and investors are paying top dollar for the most iconic Pontiac models. GTO, the original muscle car icon, the Pontiac GTO started it all. A 1964 GTO in mint condition can easily fetch six figures at auction. Even later models, like the 1969 Judge Edition, are commanding premium prices, with some examples selling for over $200,000. These cars aren't just vehicles, they are pieces of American automotive history. Trans Am, a Hollywood legend. Thanks to movies like Smokey and the Bandit and Knight Rider, the Pontiac Trans Am became a cultural phenomenon. The black and gold 1977 Trans Am with the screaming chicken decal is one of the most recognizable cars ever built. Today, pristine examples are selling for over $100,000, and values continue to rise as demand increases. Firebird Formula, the underdog, while the Trans Am gets most of the attention, the Firebird Formula is another hidden gem in the collector's market. With its high-performance options and unique styling, the Firebird Formula is quickly gaining recognition. Prices are rising, especially for models equipped with the Ram Air package. What makes these cars valuable? Pontiacs are not just increasing in price because they are old. There are key factors that drive their value higher every year. Limited production and rarity. As time passes, finding a well-preserved classic Pontiac is becoming harder. Many of these cars were driven hard, modified, or left to rust. Original, untouched models are becoming scarce, making them highly desirable among collectors. The emotional connection. Many buyers today are people who grew up in the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, a time when Pontiacs ruled the streets. These cars represent a piece of their youth, a time of high horsepower, open roads, and freedom. Owning a classic Pontiac isn't just about having a car. It's about reliving memories. Muscle car boom. The overall demand for classic muscle cars has skyrocketed. As the market for Dodge Chargers, Ford Mustangs, and Chevy Camaros heats up, Pontiacs are rising alongside them. Pontiac muscle cars offer a unique alternative to the more common choices, making them even more appealing. Modern-day Pontiac replicas and resto mods. Not everyone is searching for an all-original Pontiac. Some enthusiasts want the look of a classic with the power and reliability of a modern car. This has led to a massive rise in restomod builds and Pontiac replicas. Trans Am Depot, bringing Pontiac back. While Pontiac itself no longer exists, companies like Trans Am Depot are keeping the spirit alive. They take modern Chevy Camaros and transform them into modern Trans Ams. complete with aggressive styling, upgraded performance, and even the classic T-top roof. These cars aren't official Pontiacs, but they carry the same soul. With swaps and performance upgrades, many Pontiac owners are swapping modern LS engines into their classic cars, creating a perfect blend of old-school styling and modern power. A 1970 GTO with a supercharged LS3. That's the kind of build that makes Pontiac lovers excited. Electric conversions, the future of classic Pontiacs, and converting them to electric power. While it may seem like a controversial choice, electric muscle cars are becoming more common. Companies are developing electric crate motors that allow classic cars to have instant torque and zero emissions without losing their aggressive performance. Will Pontiac's value keep rising? The big question for collectors and enthusiasts is, will Pontiac values keep going up? All signs point to yes. As long as the demand stays strong and the supply remains limited, prices will continue to climb. Younger generations are getting interested, while many current Pontiac buyers are older enthusiasts reliving their youth. A new wave of younger car lovers is starting to appreciate these classics. As muscle cars become rarer, Pontiacs are gaining recognition among collectors who may not have even been alive when these cars were new. Hollywood and pop culture influence. Every time a Pontiac appears in a movie, TV show, or video game, its desirability increases. Whether it's a GTO in a Fast and Furious film or a Firebird in a retro TV series, these moments keep Pontiac's legacy alive in pop culture. Limited supply, unlimited demand. Unlike modern cars that can be mass-produced, classic Pontiacs are a finite resource. Every year, fewer and fewer survive, making those that remain even more special. Final thoughts. Owning a Pontiac in today's world. For those lucky enough to own a Pontiac today, you're not just holding onto a car. You're holding on to history. Whether it's a classic GTO, a Firebird, or even a lesser-known model like the Bonneville, these cars represent an era that can never be replicated. A sound that can't be replaced. The deep, rumbling V8 of a Pontiac is something that modern cars just don't have. That raw, mechanical sound is part of what makes these cars special, an investment that you can enjoy. Unlike stocks or real estate, a classic Pontiac is an investment you can drive. It's something that not only appreciates in value but also delivers an unmatched driving experience, a legacy that lives on. Even though Pontiac is no longer making new cars, its legacy continues through the enthusiasts who keep these vehicles alive. Every time a Firebird roars down the highway or a GTO burns rubber at a stoplight, Pontiac's spirit lives on. Pontiac may have left the showroom floors, but it will never leave the hearts of those who appreciate true American performance. As long as there are car lovers, Pontiac will never die. Pontiac wasn't just about style, it was about performance. While some brands focused on luxury or economy, Pontiac built its reputation on raw power and exhilarating driving dynamics. From the legendary GTO to the fire-breathing Trans Am, Pontiac engineered cars that didn't just look fast, they backed it up with high-performance engines, cutting-edge technology, and race-proven innovation. But what made Pontiac's performance stand out? What engineering secrets gave these cars their legendary status? The birth of Pontiac's performance legacy. Pontiac's journey into high performance began in the late 1950s, but it wasn't until the 1960s muscle car era that it truly made its mark. Under the leadership of John DeLorean, Pete Estes, and Bill Collins, Pontiac transformed itself from a conservative division of General Motors into the brand that defined American muscle. The GTO revolution. The 1964 GTO wasn't just another car. It was a rebellion against the industry norms. At a time when GM had a strict engine size limit for mid-size cars, Pontiac engineers found a loophole by offering the GTO as an optional package for the Tempest. This allowed them to drop a 389 cubic inch V8 under the hood of a lightweight coupe, creating what many consider the first true muscle car. Ram air induction. More than just a name. While other brands focused on cubic inches alone, Pontiac engineers developed ram air technology, a system that force-fed cool, dense air into the engine for more power and better throttle response. This wasn't just marketing hype. Tests proved that ram air